Critiquing Comics returns this week with a comic we just couldn't put down and one that we couldn't quite pick up on. Jason joins me to discuss Rebirth of the Gangster, the complete collection, a crime novel with incredible forward momentum by writer C.J. Standal and artist Juan Romera. Then Adam and I critique Toe and So Long, a rather cosmicky, rather AdventureTimey comic created by Jacob Michael Campbell with art by Alexis Vivallo. As always, a reminder that you can support the podcast by pledging a few bucks a month at patreon.com/deconcomics. Or if you'd rather give a one-time donation, you can do so via PayPal by sending it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support. This is Tim.
This is Jason.
And this is Adam.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Jason in Portland. Hi.
Greetings, Tim. Lovely to be back.
Yeah, having some trouble with Skype account here. He ended up creating a new account, but without realizing it.
Yeah, Skype. What a delight you are, Skype. What an absolute delight. If Skype was a human being, I would push them down the stairs. But we're here, and I can see you, and I can...
Yeah, the software itself is a little buggy sometimes, too, but... Yeah. Anyway, so Critiquing Comics, we're back. It's been a while since we did many critiques because it's funny how these things kind of come in spurts. There'll be like no comics submitted for months, and then suddenly like 3 or 4 are submitted in 1 week. There's no rhyme or reason to it.
Well, it's the brave soul who sends us a book after we've been pretty harsh on the last couple of projects that have come our way.
Well, yeah, the last time I talked to you, that was an Avery Hill book. That wasn't some, like, self-publisher. So...
maybe self-publishers are where it's at, based on what I read today.
Yeah, so this comic is called Rebirth of the Gangster. It's written by C.J. Standal, and art is by Juan Romera.
Well, it's the complete collection.
It's the complete collection, yes. 580 pages. 580 pages. And when I sent this to you, you said, there's no way I'm reading the whole thing. And I said, me neither. And then I started reading it, and suddenly I'm on page 300. Like, oh, I think I got to finish this. And I did.
I think I'm on page 400. Okay, I haven't finished it, so no spoilers for the end. But the same thing, I was like, the nerve of this person to send us 580 pages. They don't think I have a job or a loved one or dogs that need walking. I'm going to read a couple of, I'll read it. And then I'm like, yeah, I know I'm in. I was absolutely hooked. So,
it has so much momentum to it. And I mean, it's kind of like a soap opera with less sex and more crime. Everybody's got a gun, and you know it's going to end badly. You're just wondering how it's going to end badly.
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Well, yeah, because there are a lot of different characters in this, and it gets a little complicated. I mean, on any negative things I have to say about it feel like nitpicking practically, but especially when I finished it, I went back and read the first few issues again. There were like 24 issues altogether that are bound together in this one volume. And I realized that early on there were some flashbacks, and I think the first time I didn't quite understand that they were flashbacks. There wasn't really any signaling.
I know exactly
like,
what you're talking
this
about.
This is a flashback. This is the past. I mean, there's no narration at all in this, I don't think. And you don't necessarily have to have narration, but it's some kind of visual signal that we're going into the past. I mean, there was one point where, like this, I guess he's the main character, Marcus. We saw him, and then we saw him in the past, and his hair is different because it's the past. And I think when I first read it, I wasn't quite sure, is this a different character, or is this a flashback, or, I struggled a little bit at that point.
I know exactly the scene you're talking about. He's thoughtful and he reminisces about something that happened to him when he was young.
Mm-hmm.
And then the problem is the scene after that, he's in a convenience store with his friend,
Mm-hmm.
and they're talking about going to a party. And they sound like young people talking about a party, but that's actually the present day.
Yeah.
They're lawyers talking about going to a fun party. So yeah, this is a book that forces you to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't hold your hand in any way, and it's really I wouldn't say subtle, but it's not very like. You have to be invested and you have to pay attention.
Yeah, it doesn't hold your
I'm
hand
going through it really
for
quickly.
those things.
No.
Yeah.
The story is there. Also, I just think the artist was great. I was really, really pleased with the art in this book. There again, like nitpicking, there were two things that were stuck out to me at one point, where Marcus is in his home, and then it looks like a cop just walked into his living room and surprised him with a conversation. And then when we do a background on the cop, there's like an elevator behind her. And it seemed like they maybe had conflated two different locations. Like he was at home, but then she was walking in, which seems kind of strange. And then there was an elevator behind her. That was one goof I found. And then there was another where the couple, and they're at a kitchen table, and they do an establishing shot of the kitchen table, and they do close-ups of their faces. And then when we pull back out, one of the characters is in the opposite seat of where they started. They're on the other side of the table. Again, splitting hairs. This is just 500 pages, and I have never heard of this book. If I can just step out of the book itself for a second, to produce 24 issues of a self-published comic book, and the artist and team is consistent and they're both there. You never had to get a fill-in artist. That is amazing. How many times have you seen, like, you've got an issue 1 or an issue 2 and you're like, I'm never going to see 3 or 4,
well,
much less issue 1 more.
There was another series that we had talked about on Critiquing Comics where like every issue had a different artist, and it was really hard to follow from one issue to the next because the art kept changing. And is this the same character that I saw in the previous issue? Yeah.
This was obviously conceived this way because the story is not in a rush. Like the pacing is really intentional. Mm-hmm. For example, a character will have been knocked down, and when they're getting up, they'll take 3 panels to get them up. They're like kneeling, they're halfway up, and then the third panel, they're all the way up. And I'm like, that's interesting. You don't normally see that sort of economy of storytelling that's spaced out, but he does it throughout. They both do it throughout. Every issue almost focuses on a different character to start with. Mm-hmm. And I just thought I have some minor nitpicks about the story. Some characters make motivations to me that take me by surprise. There are other times that people learn things about another character and they don't seem to react to it the same in a way that I understand. Like the police officer finds videotape evidence of someone being involved in a murder and seemingly does nothing with it right away. She gets a little bit distracted. Another character's friend is murdered and he doesn't really seem to reflect on the murderer that much. But I also haven't finished it. I'm on page 400. But for the most part, I'm really, really impressed and surprised by this book, and I have to applaud the team for carrying through on this. I don't know if it was Kickstarted. I don't know how they did it.
I couldn't find any evidence of a Kickstarter. That's what I expected, but I usually, if there's a Kickstarter going on, I link to it. But like, no, there doesn't seem to be a Kickstarter. They've just been like churning this out.
So a huge respect for that. I that is something I haven't accomplished in 20 years of comics, to do 24 consecutive issues with someone on that level. If you have Marvel backing you, that's great. If you have Saga-like sales through Image, that's not unbelievable. But to do it on your own, to struggle in the indie market and do that, it's a huge accomplishment. So to the team, I just really applaud the execution and the follow through, and then you did it. That's fantastic.
One other kind of...
Okay, my other...
Go ahead.
I have a nitpick too. And I'm saying this because I talked to my editor today who tore my recent script to pieces. There's one phrase, I think it's the light I am the light that comes out of the darkness, or the light out of the darkness is a phrase that is used, I think, 4 or 5 times in the first 4 pages. So at the very beginning, when I first started this, I got 5 pages in, and I was like, oh boy, this might be an issue. Just because I think a good editor, you're gonna use the phrase twice. You don't need to use 4 or 5 times in as many pages. But I never had that issue again after that beginning. And I think beginnings are hard.
Mm-hmm.
So once I was invested in the story, I didn't see any other opportunities where I would change things. For the most part, I thought the dialogue was very naturalistic and good. Sometimes people are a little bit on the nose with what they were saying, but you know, minor. Again, I'm splitting hairs. I thought this book was really well done, and I'm gripped. You know, and you and I see a lot of comic books, and some of them are a chore to read. The pacing on this. Yeah, the pacing on this was excellent, and the amount of dialogue on page was excellent. The lettering, not my favorite. It's not too bad.
Yeah, I wasn't.
There is it feels like there's
this is super nitpicky, but sometimes the connectors between word balloons for the same person were like too thick, too kind of
huge.
wide. Yeah.
They were like, it was almost, that was exactly what I was going to get to. Is the connecting balloons? I think they're just called connectors. Were way too wide, and I think this wasn't done like in. I letter things. Most people letter things in Illustrator or InDesign. I think this was like an out of the box program that I've seen people use before. I think it's just called lettering for comics. So if I could do anything to change this book, I would probably just make the balloons a little thinner. Instead of a 1 point line, a 0.75 line. That the font they used was great, and where the balloons were placed was great. I just thought some of the connecting didn't look as professional as everything else. Everything else looked like it could have been published by Dark Horse or Boom, in my opinion. I thought it was of a very high professional quality. The lettering was the only thing that didn't seem like it was as professionally done. It was competent.
Some of the characters... I think that the artist was drawing cheekbones on them, and they had like these big black stripes on either side of their face. That kind of threw me a little bit. I'm not sure why they've got so much ink on their face.
I kind of got used to that. Yeah, that was like a stylistic choice where they're almost like this indent, this V-dent on their faces. But, for a black and white book or grayscale, it could be really easy for like all the female characters with dark hair to look the same. I thought the artist did a really good job of giving them all like slightly different body types. So all the female characters didn't look like the same amorphous blob. They gave different haircuts, different body types. I thought they did a good job with that. I was just really, really impressed.
Sometimes I felt like, like a soap opera, this is bouncing from one situation to another, and there are connections between the situations. Some of the scenes felt a little too short to me. That's super nitpicky to say, but I was kind of like, I guess I was sort of expecting the average length of a soap opera scene, because I used to be a General Hospital addict in the past, and also Dallas. But sometimes it's like 5 panels and on to the next page, on to the next scene. It's like, that'd be like a 30-second scene on TV. It's a little short.
Luke and Laura forever, Tim. Luke and Laura forever. There's a rhythm that they were creating where they would check in with the mom and her struggles for a page, and then they'd check in with the other mom for like a page. And it was like sort of like this intentional rhythm that they were doing. So they were condensing scenes to be a page. And I agree. Sometimes the conversations felt a bit superficial. Like had we stayed with them a little bit longer, we would have got a deeper look into them. But I just think it was really their aesthetic is to move through all of this quick and keep it entertaining and keep it moving. You know what it really reminded me of? Aside from the crime aspect, obviously Brubaker does this really well. But Stray Bullets by Dave Lapham. Each issue is like a black and white part of a bigger crime piece, but it just told one story, and they all sort of interlocked when you finish the entire series, which is huge. I think it's like 30-something pages. So I definitely got a Dave Lapham feel to this, in that some of the crime, some of the situations are not quote-unquote realistic, but they still work as a unit. It still works as a vibe and a tone. And I don't need realism all the time in stories, To wit, there's one scene where a character falls backwards and just happens to crash through a glass coffee table, and their jugular is cut. And I thought, well, that's
unlikely. Yeah,
that's a reach. But then I realized, Tim, I have the exact same scene in The Rattler, a book I did 10 years ago with Image Comics. I have the exact same scene. So I was about to wag my finger and be like, oh, no. Sometimes you just need to kill somebody really quick. And those glass tables, they're murder, Tim, let me tell you. They're absolute murder. Yeah, note for note, I did the same thing. So sometimes you just, you need to have things move. You can't worry about realism. Realism will hold you back.
And also, this is self-published, and I'm sure they're conscious of how many pages they're going to have to get printed, and so there might have been, economizing to keep it from, keep the cost down a bit.
I'm just impressed. They clearly had a plan at the beginning how long this was. Issue 1 is like they break it into acts. Mm-hmm. The pacing is really intentional. It's not just like a race to the finish to get the story out. So I really applaud the thoughtfulness of it all.
Yeah.
And I just Googled it quickly, and apparently these books are available everywhere. They're available at Target. So I feel like I feel ignorant that I missed out on the Rebirth of the Gangster phenomenon as an indie comics creator. My other question to you is, who is the Rebirth of the Gangster?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what the title was referring to. There is something at the very end. You said you hadn't quite finished it.
I'm on page 400. Give me some credit.
Okay. Yeah. But there was a quote in the back that I'm trying to find where there was something about rebirth. But yeah, I'm not sure who the gangster is. Is it Marcus?
They're all involved in crime. It could just be a general theme, I think it works as a blanket. But in the beginning, I was like, who is going to be returning as the gangster life? Is it the father? It's also sort of generational. They're also picking up threads that their parents had created before them. But I just appreciated all the characters had a background. All the characters had their own individual motivation, their own conflicts. Mm-hmm. Nobody was just like tacked on as like, I'm the mother character or I'm the father character. They really gave all of them their own sort of life and space and spotlight, which is hard to do. This is not an easy book to write. I want to say that. Like, it's intentionally planned, and there's a lot of moving pieces that, from my perspective, all land and move across the board really, really well. Mm-hmm. So I think, if you're out there and you like crime stories and crime comics, as I do, and you might be a fan of Stray Bullets or, I don't know, this Ed Brubaker kid, he seems to be going places. If you like anything he does, maybe, don't buy the next Ed Brubaker book and buy Rebirth of the Gangster and give it these upstart creators a chance. Because I think what they've accomplished is pretty it's worth celebrating.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to reread this. Well, I did reread the first few issues, like I said, and it kind of helped me. Now you recognize the characters, and you can kind of okay, so this was that, and this is how that connects to this, and I'd like to read the whole thing again. Yeah,
very densely plotted. But really, really enjoyable, and just really, really well done. Mm-hmm. We did the nitpicks. One other compliment I want to give the artist is many of their panels don't have a border on them, which I think is really, really smart when you're doing black and white or grayscale, because the composition, looking at the page as a whole, there could be way too much black on the page. So by removing those black panel borders and just letting the art breathe and go to the edges, it just really made the composition just really pleasant to look at. It's a nice balance of blacks, whites, and grays.
Yeah, I had not noticed that, but I'm flipping through. Yeah, there are some borderless panels.
There's a bunch of them, and it just lets it breathe a little bit more and keeps it from being too dark. Yeah, I really like this artist. I'm going to look for other stuff they've done. And I saw that the author is also an educator. Also looks like they teach comics as well, as do I. So I have a kindred spirit. I'm going to follow more of their work. It looks like in the beginning they wrote a book about comics and teaching comics, which is right up my alley. Mm-hmm. So this is going to inspire me to buy more work from the creators.
Cool.
So my critique is I loved it. Great job. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm a cranky sourpuss. I wanted to read 30 pages, and I spent all afternoon reading this.
Yeah, me too. I mean, like, and it's even books I enjoy often, like, I'll read a few pages and, like, oh, I kind of need to back off for a second. But this, I just kept going, I just kept going. It was like popcorn.
Yeah, really well done. It's not the most original piece I've ever read, but it is a really, really well done crime caper. And at the indie level, I think that's something to really celebrate a book of this length. So, just thumbs up all around.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
See, Avery Hill, can be done. Boom!
More info at cjstandalproductions.com. There's a link in the show notes. Coming up, Adam and I discuss the rather psychedelic first issue of Toe and So Long. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. Deconstructing Comics earns a bit of money from your purchase that helps us keep the show going. We really appreciate your support.
Hey, I'm Jen.
And I'm Sean. We're here to tell you about our podcast, Worst Collection Ever.
And this is the show where we tell you about the worst comic book collection in existence. And it just happens to belong to us.
We have some of the worst comics from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They're bad.
Terrible.
They're not worth anything.
No good.
Why do we own
Very
them?
bad.
I own a number of issues of Terror Inc. and Guy Gardner.
Basically, we go around to local comic book stores and we buy everything we can out of dollar boxes.
We tell you about the weird stuff in them. We tell you about stuff that's related to them. We go into tangents. And we're very uninformed, so...
Oh my god, totally. But totally check out our podcast because you'll hear us just talk and joke about Marvel books and DC books from God only knows when.
That's right. It's our show, Worst Collection Ever, every Tuesday on iTunes, Stitcher, anywhere you get your podcasts. Download, rate, subscribe, tell a friend.
It'll be good and terrible, but good.
Okay, so now I'm with Adam in Nagoya. How are you doing?
Not bad, Tim. How's everything there?
Okay. We had a very warm Sunday, March 31st, but now it seems like it's going to be a little cooler again for a few weeks. Cherry blossoms are finally blooming.
Yeah, it's that time of year where you have free license to get drunk in the park.
Yep. Yeah, that's Japan. Okay, so this comic, this is a puzzling comic with a puzzling name. It's called Toe and So Long. So Toe, T-O-E. The creator is Jacob Michael Campbell. He's writing it, and the artist is Alexis Vivallo. So Toe and So Long are the two main characters. Toe is this kind of humanoid creature who's entirely white. Looks like he was drawn by a 6-year-old. Just got a really, really simple face that looks like it was drawn on. Now, if I were talking to a Japanese, I would say he looks kind of like Teruteru Bozu, but I don't know that our native English-speaking listeners would know what that is. Teruteru Bozu is... How do you explain it?
It's like a rain charm, right? So little kids tie up basically a handkerchief or even sometimes just tissue paper or something like that, right? And then you put something in the middle like a ball and then tie around the bottom so it has sort of the shape of a ghost. Like the top is wrapped around and then there's a rubber band underneath it or something to kind of give this look. And then you put it in the window and it's supposed to
and you draw a little
rain?
Face on it. It's supposed to prevent rain.
Okay.
It's like, tomorrow I've got a school field trip and I don't want it to rain, so you do Teruteru Bozu, and then it rains anyway, but possibly. But it's like praying for it to not rain. So the way of drawing a Teruteru Bozu face is a little bit different from this, but it's similarly simple.
Yeah. Before we move on to the comic, I have one question for you, which is this. My wife and my kids, they're always using the phrase ame o na, or like ame otoko, right? Like, oh, you're prone to like make it rain, so whenever you come, it rains. So I was wondering about like the math on that. Is it like there's a certain number of people who are rain people and other people who are sunshine people? And if the rain people outnumber the sun people in every given place, then it rains? Or do they cancel each other out? I don't really know how that works.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if you have too many of both of them, then it snows. I don't know.
Yeah. We need to do some research on this.
Okay.
But, yeah, about this face, I think, you know what it reminded me a little bit of is that famous street artist Kaws, Kaws. It's like this kind of cutesy, bubbly skull. And this guy kind of looks like that because he's got the weird little mouth that's like, I don't know, it's almost like a mustache with no mustache, like his skin is in the shape of a mustache, or I don't know. But to be honest, I actually kind of like his design. It is very simple, like you said, but it feels finished to me. So it's almost like a Peanuts character, the way that it's very, very simplified, but it still feels complete.
Yeah.
So I was actually more interested in the design of Toe than I was of So Long, because
So Long is a black cat.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And they're a strange pair just in terms of character design. Because So Long is a pretty normal-looking black cat, well, cartoony black cat with a bandana around his or her neck. I don't know the genders of these characters. But it's just kind of a strange pairing.
It is, yeah. So here's my take on this, is I think the artwork feels very influenced by like Adventure Time and like that era of like Cartoon Network kind of programming. So this combination reminds me a lot of Finn and Jake from Adventure Time, where you have just a kind of weirdly shaped human who's walking around with a, talking dog, and this is swapping that for a cat. But the artwork in general has a very similar feel, and actually the humor sense has a similar feel as well, because it has this kind of cavalier humor sense where they might be in a really weird or dangerous situation, but they don't seem to care at all.
Yeah, that tone was really reminding me of Adventure Time.
Yeah.
And so, to talk about the story a little bit. Well, so they are apparently forever wandering this plane full of doors that are just standing around randomly. They call this the doorscape. And they can just walk into any of the doors they want to and go into that reality. And in this episode, they enter a reality where people are ruled over by an authoritarian cathode ray tube monitor. And the people there all seem perfectly agreeable to whatever the CRT is saying.
Yeah.
We'll do this, we'll do that, and that's fine. Yeah, no problem. I wanted that to happen. And so they're all nonchalant about it. And Toe and So Long are also kind of nonchalant about it. Well, I mean, they're saying things like, "Oh, another CRT that's an authoritarian ruler." It's
like they've seen it all.
Same day, different authoritarian CRT.
Yeah.
Or different day. Anyway, so they are captured because because they kind of don't belong there, or they don't quite fit in. And they're really nonchalant when they're in prisons. Like, are they going to try capital punishment on us? Just like, I wonder.
Almost excited about it, the prospect of it, right? Like,
yeah,
that's definitely what made me think of Adventure Time, is the fact that they know that there's not really any danger to them. Like no matter what happens, they're pretty much okay. So, when they go to meet the CRT, when they're summoned to be right in front of him, the first thing that Toe says is "sup," right? And then, but the CRT is equally like kind of casual. Like he starts every sentence with an "okay."
Yeah, he says "okay" a lot.
Yeah, which also happens to be, spoiler alert, the secret password for unlocking the hidden information. So, but yeah, I think that that worked in this comic's favor for sure. It had a very playful, kind of casual feeling to it the whole time. So you never, the danger never really escalates. It's always just kind of this, you're along for the ride of this kind of craziness. So.
And it has some kind of like intentionally contradictory expressions in it, like a fascinating drudgery.
Yeah. I was actually a little bit worried when I came across that sentence because the very first little bit of exposition, it seems like the writer was trying to be really, really verbose, maybe like intentionally trying to use really long sentences full of big words. And then, so I was like, oh, it's going to be that kind of a comic book. And then after that, there's hardly any exposition at all. And the dialogue is, as we said, it's mostly like, very casual stuff of them saying sup and stuff like that. So.
And there are quite a few silent pages.
Yeah, exactly. Which is honestly, the fact that this is a writer and a artist team, I think that shows kind of a lot of confidence in the writer's ability, because a lot of writers feel like they have to fill up every page with words. And so if the writer lets the page breathe and gives lots of, pages like that without any words at all, that means they trust the artist, and that means they trust the reader to get a story out of it, even without, over explaining everything. So
I liked the art. I thought it was, the storytelling was fine, and it was a attractive art style and very colorful. And yeah, I mean, the tone of the writing is nice, but I'm just not quite sure I understand what the point of this comic is. I mean, it seemed like the lesson was authoritarianism is bad.
Yeah.
Oh, really? That had never occurred to me.
Well, it could be also that this, this seems like sort of this adventure of the week kind of thing where maybe there isn't any overarching kind of like point. It could just be that, oh, they're on another adventure. That part reminds me a little bit of, if you've ever seen the Netflix show Midnight Gospel, which was also made by the creator of Adventure Time, I believe. That one is a similar kind of thing where you have this guy who lives in space, and he can like go into these weird virtual worlds and experience anything he wants to experience. And he ends up having these long talks and all of them and stuff. But this is kind of like that, where you never know exactly where you're going to go. They just kind of open a door randomly and go in for the adventure. And so it could be that they're not ever really trying to make a point. Maybe they're just having a fun little excursion into some world, but, which is fine. I'm fine with that. Like, I don't think it necessarily has to have some fine point on it. So,
I'm wondering, late in the story, this like kind of fuzzy alligator with little antlers appears, and I didn't understand what that was about. Maybe like in future issues that would be explained. I don't know.
Yeah, is that, now here's what, I wasn't sure, but I thought that might be like a dragon that formed out of whatever shot out of the cat's mouth. That was my first thought, because you see him hold the cat almost like a gun, and then this projectile comes shooting out, which at first I thought might be a hairball or something like that. But then it kind of loops around and comes back, and it's this dragon. But then after that, they wake up back in their...
Back on the doorscape.
In the doorscape. And so I thought maybe that dragon is what is facilitating this door travel or something like that, because that is a mystery. The CRT wants to know how they get back to the doorscape. And they don't know, they just fall asleep and wake up back in the doorscape. So I thought maybe there's a possibility this dragon is connected to that as well, but it's not clear.
Yeah, I don't know. They are kickstarting issue 2 right now. And I'm wondering, like, will future issues just be different versions of this, or will, like, the kind of mysteries of it gradually be revealed? Like, what is this dragon alligator thing, and how do they end up back on the doorscape after each adventure and that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot that they could still keep exploring, because obviously this story leaves it open for the possibility for anything to happen at all.
Yes.
And so, you know, I think it's very imaginative storytelling, and obviously the artwork really complements that. It's very, very colorful, and a lot of gradients, but the gradients aren't like that tacky kind of like computer gradient. They actually look kind of brushed in. I do think I'm almost positive that this was created digitally, but even so, there is an effort to kind of make it look hand done in some cases. And there's some really cool stuff going on with the way that they play with color. So the PDF that I have doesn't really have page numbers, but I think it's page 17. The CRT, you can actually see this kind of bright green, almost yellow-green kind of glow around the monitor, and then the rest of the monitor kind of goes back to a standard green. And so it makes it look like it's glowing. In fact, that's probably every panel that shows the monitor. The front panel is this kind of glowing green.
Yeah, that's true. The lighting effects in general are pretty well done.
Yeah, I think so. There's right in the very beginning on the first page when they're walking, you can see the sun coming up over the plain, and there's these long shadows being cast from them, it shows that they understand, like, when the light source is at that point, it's going to do this, you know. So it's kind of cool. Like, you can tell that this person, as simple as the artwork is, because the backgrounds are mostly like just splashes of color and stuff like that, and the characters, as you said, are very simply drawn, but this artist clearly has a sense of composition and color balance and things like that. So my only real criticism of the artwork would be that there's a lot of textures that sometimes don't necessarily go well with each other. So there's like some halftone patterns that look like old like standard kind of old pulp comics, but then they're with like more polished colors in the same frame. Or I don't know, there are some like when they're in jail, there's a texture over the bars that looks very, very digital, very digitized almost, and then it just doesn't totally fit with some of the other textures in the scene. But that's really the only thing I can think of that stuck out to me. Everything else, you know, it looks really well done. I think the colors and everything, you know, and like the perspective and stuff is really well done. So,
well, yeah, I'm looking at that page. That's interesting because, yeah, the floor of the cell and the wall are in these kind of Ben-Day dots, with the bars in front with that completely different texture to them. And actually, I feel like it gives it kind of a 3D effect.
Yeah, it does. I guess, in my opinion, the 3D effect is, I don't like it, I guess. But that's just my own personal taste, probably. There's something about it that just, maybe it's the simplification of the characters and then like the over-textured background, or I'm not really sure, because I like that kind of look as well when it's like simplified characters on a, you know, it's almost like a Cerebus kind of thing going on. But I can't really put my finger on what it is about the textures that rubs me the wrong way, but there's only a few panels that I feel that way about. The rest of them I feel, you know, have a really nice, smooth kind of balance to them. So
Yeah. So yeah, this is an interesting one. I'm kind of curious to see what they're planning for it in the future issues.
It was a very quick and easy read. I could have probably read this 3 or 4 times in 15 minutes.
Yes.
So, but it's a fun, playful book with fun, playful artwork. And so, if this was a series, I could totally see. Well, I mean, I guess I should say it's also a very all ages kind of friendly book. So I could read this with my kids and we could both take something out of it, because there are points where I laughed as a middle-aged guy, and I'm sure that my children could find humor in it as, teenagers and stuff. So, and one thing that I did want to say while you were talking about the cathode ray tube monitor is, in Japanese, that is called brown kan. I think Brown is the person who invented that.
Oh.
But so it's brown kan, and kan is like literally the word for tube. And so I was explaining to somebody at work that it's called that, and in English we call it the tube, and that's why YouTube is called that, because it's a TV for everybody. And it blew their minds. They were like, they had all the pieces in their mind, right? They know con equals tube, and they know YouTube. But yeah, so anyway, that's apropos of nothing. Much like my discussion about rain, women, and men. So this episode is a lot of red herrings and weird little detours off the main path.
Wikipedia. The earliest version of the CRT was known as the Braun tube, invented by the German physicist Ferdinand Braun in 1897.
Okay, so that makes sense. If it was called a Braun tube, and then they just
and it's
copied
right
it
during
way.
Meiji times when Japan was borrowing a lot from Germany.
Yeah,
so it fits together.
It does, yeah. So it's one of those German words like carte and all the other ones that they have in Japanese. Arbeito.
Okay, but yeah, I will link to their Kickstarter for issue 2.
All right, yeah. I would recommend this to anybody to go check out if you just want a kind of fun little diversion. Without having to think too much.
The Kickstarter for Toe and So Long is linked from the show notes. If you're enjoying this podcast, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics, and go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on X, Facebook, or YouTube. Via our site, you can also shop on Amazon to support the show and find links to subscribe to the podcast. You can comment on any episode there, or drop us a line at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. And now you can also send us a voicemail. Find the Leave a Voicemail link on the left sidebar of our site. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is from bensound.com. Next week on Deconstructing Comics, at last, Emmett is back, and we resume our look at Jack Kirby's 1970s work, with the first 5 issues of the 2001 A Space Odyssey series. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics.